Hello and thank you for joining us today for an update on the ACEA heavy-duty engine oil sequences. My name is Alan Henderson. I have marketing responsibility for heavy-duty engine oils in the EMEA region for Afton Chemical. I'm joined by Charlotte Edwards from our Engine Oils Customer Technical Service team. We'll be covering three areas today. Firstly, what are the changes in ACEA 2022? Secondly, the timeline for implementation. And finally, what it means for the market.
To begin with, we're going to talk through the changes which have taken place with the release of the heavy-duty ACEA sequences for 2022. Starting at the top, we've seen the removal of ACEA E6 and E9, which have been replaced by ACEA E8 and E11 respectively. Next are the engine test changes which have come into place. Replacement piston cleanliness tests have come into the existing sequences, along with newer tests introduced into ACEA E8 and E11. The final change which has come in is the increased focus on oxidation control. This is reflected in the tightening of the OM 646 LA bio test limit, along with the inclusion of the Volvo T13 engine. So what do the updated sequences look like? If we start with the current ACEA 2016 sequences, which can be seen on the left-hand side of the slide, with ACEA E4, E7, E6 and E9. We already know ACEA E6 and E9 have been removed from the sequences and replaced with ACEA E8 and E11. These newer sequences include engine tests already utilised in the API CK4 category, namely the Volvo T13 and the Caterpillar aeration test. The ACEA E4 and E7 sequences remain within the specification as they are, just with a couple of slight engine test changes, which we'll talk about later.
An obvious omission from ACEA 2022 is the F sequences, which were to support lower high temperature high shear oils, also known as HTHS. Low HTHS oils are needed for improved fuel economy. The reality is that OEMs driven by upcoming legislation changes have gone further and faster than was proposed in the F sequences. The proposed F sequences had HTHS limits between 2.9 and 3.2 centipoise. However, most European OEMs have already moved lower to 2.6 HTHS. For a successful implementation of the F sequences, it will be important there is alignment between ACEA sequences and what OEMs are recommending.
In the ACEA 2016 sequences, the OM501LA was the engine test used to assess piston cleanliness. However, in the ACEA 2022 sequences update, we see a number of alternative piston cleanliness tests being used. For example, ACEA E7 now sees the use of the Caterpillar 1N in place of the OM501LA, and for the ACEA E4 and E11 sequences, the OM471 or Caterpillar C13 can alternatively be run respectively. However, for the ACEA E4, E7 and E11 sequences, grandfathering of the OM501LA engine test data is allowed to support an ACEA 2022 claim, provided the test result meets the ACEA 2016 requirements. We've talked specifically about the piston cleanliness engine test used in each of the sequences, but now let's talk through how the engine test requirements for each of the sequences now looks. Starting with the ACEA 2016 engine test list, which you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, we've colour-coded what each of the tests assess. In the navy blue boxes, you see the engine tests used to assess the piston cleanliness and/or dispersant handling capability of the finished engine oil. Engine tests shown in green boxes look to assess the engine wear protection. And finally, engine tests shown in the lighter blue boxes are those used to assess the engine oil's oxidation control. Now, if we start to look at how these engine test changes as you move from 2016 to 2022, what do you see? First off, we see the removal of the ACEA E6 and E9 sequences, which are then replaced with the ACEA E8 and E11. From a starting point, these two new sequences have the same engine test requirements as to what we've seen in ACEA E6 and E9. The second change is then the inclusion of the newer engine tests coming into ACEA E8 and E11. We see the adoption of the Volvo T13 and Caterpillar aeration tests from the API CK4 category. In addition to this is the newer piston cleanliness test, the OM471 for ACEA E8. For ACEA E11, we see the use of the Caterpillar C13 engine, with the caveat that the OM501LA engine test data can be grandfathered to support such a claim. The final change that we then see is the ACEA E4 and E7 sequences, where the alternative piston cleanliness tests are now listed. However, remember that historical OM501LA data points can be used in place to support them. So how does this all impact the final ACEA 2022 sequences? Well, here on the slide you see a summary of the final makeup of ACEA 2022. The three colours show the different areas the tests assess against. Just remember, grandfathering of the piston cleanliness test can be done in the ACEA E4, E7 and E11 sequences.
Now that ACEA 2022 has been launched, it's important to understand the timeline for implementation. New products have 1 year before it becomes mandatory to ensure claims are against the 2022 sequences, whereas existing products have a 2-year period to upgrade claims. So we wanted to finish today with a look at how the on-road heavy-duty engine oil market will evolve over the next 5 years. What you see in the top right is the low HDHS oils, which were not included in ACEA 2022, growing from a niche, largely factory-fill position currently to a significant part of the market as OEMs work to reduce CO2 emissions through improved fuel economy. The long-drain reduced SAPS 10W market is expected to account for 1/3 driven by service fill demand. Alongside the continued growth of reduced SAPS oils, it is important to recognise that full SAPS oils, whilst in decline, still maintain a sizable market presence, partially from older vehicles, but also strong export demand. All of this shows the importance of having oils for each of the current ACEA sequences, as well as the low HDHS oils that will likely be seen in future F sequences. Afton is proud to have technology for each of these segments, and your Afton Chemical representative will be happy to discuss our portfolio with you.